David Thomas Tao. I couldn't be more honored, brother. It's we're here in New York for a week of meetings for Bourbon Lore and some exciting stuff, and we're just at Sotheby's last night on the American Whiskey panel, and David's been showing us some love and joining us at a few different events that we've been at, and we kind of threw it out there and like, hey, what if we came to your place? What do you got going on over here? And so thank you for having us. We couldn't be more excited to be here, and want to share a few words around who you are.
Well, I mean, thanks for coming to my hood, guys. It made it. Someone wants to come over at 10:30 a.m. and drink a little whiskey on a Friday. It's Friday. It's
we got
fine.
snow. We have snow falling.
It's basically the week. Yeah, snow is falling. It's kind of idyllic here. You know, in the old part of one of the old parts of Brooklyn. I had a blast getting to know you guys a little bit. Hopefully, get to know you guys a little better. My name's David. Born in Louisville, raised in Bardstown. I'll probably get disowned by some Bardstonians when they remember I wasn't born there, but no, grew up in Bardstown, right on 2nd Street. So
pretty incredible.
Right off Distillers Row. You know, a lot of the folks who are kind of titans of the industry right now. I was very lucky to call friends and sometimes frenemies growing up, as we do in elementary and middle school. But you know, that was really my introduction to the culture around bourbon in the 90s when I grew up in Bardstown, which was just a really lovely place and very different than it is today. I like to emphasize that to people. They go to Bardstown, they're doing the Bourbon Trail, they're looking at whiskey culture as it is today in a very kind of tourist-friendly capacity. And back then, it wasn't really that. I tell people, go to the Bourbon Festival today, the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and you're going to get a really fun experience, right? But it wasn't, the Bourbon Festival was not a bourbon festival back then. It was like the local townsfolk's family festival.
More like a state fair.
Very much. It was bouncy castles and barbecues, right? And you know what? They didn't actually have a ton of whiskey. They had a big beer garden. And I know that because my first ever job was with the local Boy Scout troop. We worked sanitation. That's how we paid for the troop for the whole year of the festival. The city would pay us, and we go empty the trash barrels. And let me tell you, emptying out that beer garden when you're about 12 or 13 years old, and you kind of see the remnants of that.
That was life changing.
It was life. It was good work. It was an honest day's work, and it tells you, teaches you a little bit about moderation. Let me tell you how much. But it was very different, and I was very lucky to grow up there, and then left for school. Ended up going to boarding school in Tennessee, and for me, whiskey has been a way to stay connected to the culture I grew up in as whiskey has grown. Because I remember when I moved to New York City, you know, all 13, 14 years ago, I was honestly, and I'm ashamed to say, I wouldn't tell people I was from Kentucky when they asked where I was from. I don't really have much of an accent, which is weird because other people in my family do. It's kind of skip me. And, you know, I didn't want to tell people that because I thought there were a lot of stereotypes around that. People would think, you know, you're uneducated, you're not worldly, you're close-minded, you know, which are all false, right? Kentucky's a diverse and wonderful place with a lot of great people. But as the bourbon boom really started to kick in, people would find out I'm from Kentucky, and I knew the tide was changing because they started saying, hey, like, can you get me an appointment at, you know, X such and such distillery? Do you know anyone here? And I'd be like, how dare you ask? And they'd be like, yeah, I can. Yeah, I know. Or I'd be like, you know, I can't, but my mom can. You know, like that, the real power. And that's when I knew, probably around 2015, that bourbon wasn't just the industry that was keeping Bardstown relevant. It was the industry that was making Bardstown a destination. And I thought, thank you. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I thought, you know, it's going to be, if it's a way that people are connecting to where I grew up and to that community, then it'd be a shame if I didn't use whiskey as a way to reconnect with who I grew up around. Yeah. And so I've been so fortunate because I feel like it's a little bit of a cheat code in whiskey. If to say you're from Bardstown, people are like, oh, you know what you're talking about, even when I don't know what I'm talking about at all.
So would you say that bourbon has kind of become a little bit of like a personal rediscovery of like your pride for your hometown? Very much so. It's been a journey of self-discovery. And I say that if you had asked me that 4 years ago, I would have said that's a little crunchy granola, to be honest. But I think that obviously the pandemic, when I couldn't really travel, when people weren't traveling and I couldn't go home, and you know, my mother was in the medical field, recently retired, so she was she was like, don't come home because I'm exposed, you know, I'm in the hospital, we can't be around that many people. It made me miss it. It made me realize that I had kind of taken that for granted, and
and part of my identity, a huge part of it, is being from Kentucky, being a Kentucky boy, being from Bardstown, kind of being born and raised there. I think we spend a lot of our adolescence and our young years and our 20s searching for who we are and trying to figure it out. And I feel like it had just been hiding under my nose the whole time, right? Yeah. And it was really warm and cathartic and wonderful to realize, I don't know if I can really, I'm multi-ethnic, multiracial. I'd spent my whole life thinking, which group do I belong to? Who should I identify as? And the answer is, Kentucky's what I know, and that's as good an identity as any. So,
Amen. Absolutely beautiful. I appreciate that. I mean, you think, to me, how many of us that are passionate about whiskey that are in various places across the country, and what a blessing that you've had the opportunity to be able to see it firsthand and experience it. Not only as somebody that's interested in the product, but actually lived it. So, I'm curious, when you look at where Bardstown was when you were growing up and where it's at today, as somebody who lived there as a child and sees it today, prospering, like, what does it mean to you? I'm just curious, like, how's it changed?
I wrote a big long article for VinePair. I remember my editor cut it in half. He's like, it's got to be half as long as you're writing a novel. And I interviewed all sorts of folks about it. And it's with growth comes challenge. And I see Bardstown going through a lot of growing pains right now. Some of those are good, right? A lot of economic opportunity. David Mandel, who founded Bardstown Bourbon Company, now has Whiskey House. Big entrepreneur in and around Bardstown. I'm misquoting him a little, but he's like, well, what happens if a river of cash just gets dumped in your backyard? And that's what the bourbon boom is for Bardstown, right? But with that come a lot of challenges. Bardstown's a tiny little town. Yeah. Infrastructurally, there's not enough water there to support the growth of distilleries, and they have to build a new water line from Louisville. There aren't enough roads for all the trucks coming in and out. So they're building new road capacity, but the road capacity they have that's going to open later this year in 2024, by the time it opens, it's already going to be behind the capacity that will have grown, the need that will have grown. Yeah. So it's about playing catch up, and I think the main challenge with Bardstown is, how do you make it a place where people really want to stay for a while, and not a place that's really easy to come for a day and then leave and pass through? Because Louisville's got the hotels, right? Louisville has that infrastructure. Yeah. Most people that come to Bardstown, they go to one or two distilleries, have one or two experiences. It's great. They might stop by, the bar at Willet. I know a place where you've spent many a day.
Big fan.
He's a little biased here, but and it's a really easy place to come, visit, and then leave. But for the town to become a destination and not just a pass through on the Bourbon Trail, they have to figure out how the infrastructure can support the growth and how the tourism industry can encourage people to actually stay a while.
Yeah.
American whiskey here, New York, what does it mean? Obviously for somebody that has grown up in Bardstown and your love and connection with it, I'm curious, like, for you were sharing with us, there's quite a few people, and even in your neighborhood, that are passionate about it. What do you think it means to people here in New York?
I think New York is so rich in distilling culture, but I think a lot of it's been forgotten. Colin Spolman, one of the founders of Kings County Distillery, we actually went to the same high school. We were in different years. He's written some really, really great books. One of the books he co-authored is called Dead Distillers. Really, really big fan of that, and it tells the story of American history, westward expansion, economic development, through the biographies of folks who were very impactful in American distilling culture. I mean, from the 1600s all the way through to today, basically. And a lot of that began in New York. I mean, old New York was once New Amsterdam, right? You know what I mean? And this is a lot of early records, tax records, snippets of media that we can find from hundreds of years ago. A lot of American distilling culture began in New York, because a lot of what we know as the United States today and our history is tied to New York City, right? So we're not far from a cemetery where many impactful historic distillers are buried here in Brooklyn. We're not far from that. Staten Island, one of the first distilleries on record in pre-American history, pre the United States, but in early American history, was in Staten Island, right? And that's just like, we can walk down to the water after this if you want. I know you guys got somewhere else to be after this, and we can look at it, right? And we can see that it's just a ferry ride away. And so I feel like New York in New York, it's very easy to be like, oh, distilling culture, that's Kentucky and maybe Pennsylvania and Maryland if you go back even further.
Right.
But a lot of it began here.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see the growing distilling community in New York City that's really happened since 2010, and a lot of that begins with Kings County, actually, which is only about a mile and a half from here.
I feel like America's rediscovery of aged spirits, bourbon, and that history, a lot of that stems from cocktail culture. And cocktail culture is huge, and it has been for a long time in New York. And so I'm sure those two play like a major role as well.
I absolutely, there's some really great cocktail bars in Lower Manhattan, and you think of where they're positioned now. I mean, France's Tavern is one, which is a historic building. It's where Washington actually bid adieu to his generals after the Revolutionary War. And you can go get a great cocktail there. There are a few great bars. The Dead Rabbit's right there on that block as well, in that historic district. So you can drink there, and you can think, well, I'm just a few steps from where Alexander Hamilton had an office. I'm just a short walk from where Alexander Hamilton's buried. This is where George Washington, basically disbanded his generals. This is where, New York was the American capital before Washington, D.C. for a little bit. And then I also think, well, I have some ancestors who came over in the early 1900s, and they were Syrian migrants, right? And I was like, well, they got off the boat just a few blocks from where I'm drinking these cocktails. And a lot of people don't know what's now Tribeca was actually called Little Syria for a few decades because there was a heavy Arab Christian population there, which is really neat. So you can explore all this while you're sipping a delicious cocktail at the bottom tip of Manhattan and just think, I'm steps away from so much history.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
That's exceptional.
Well, speaking of Bardstown and the bar at Willet, and one of my favorite places, the land of milk and honey. What do we have here? A couple specialties from the David Thomas Tao home bar.
Well, we can make cocktails out of these if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. Maybe a neat pour. I would actually love for you. So I opened this bottle a few months ago. Okay. We got 1583 here.
Yes.
And I've enjoyed it a lot, but it's unlike you. I don't necessarily write down and rate everything I drink. I probably should. And you saw this on the shelf and you were like, ooh, I think I scored that pretty well. And you looked it up and you gave it a 10 out of 10, which is only the third highest score on your scale, I think.
It is a 10 out of 10. Shout out Danny Cook, who shared this with me when it first came out. This is actually a pretty modern release from Willet. This was a March, I believe, 2023 gift shop release, quiet gift shop release. Absolutely delicious. It's old, 19 years sourced Kentucky. Not sure where it's from. Can make your guesses, but maybe we could pour some and we can have a discussion.
That sounds fantastic.
But of course, it's Willet whiskey. It's some of the greatest in the world. So
Emerson is one of our key teammates and business partners in Bourbon Lore, and you have a true love affair with Willet. So
I do.
Why don't you share with us just a little bit about your background with Willet?
Willet is it feels like family to me. It is the most inconsistently consistent bourbon. It's like it's
beautifully
maybe
said.
I flip those around, but anyways, it's like the beauty of Willet is that they were so ahead of their time. They were visionaries. They sourced amazing whiskey from all different distilleries. A lot of those don't exist anymore, and they just put it under their own label, barrel number. It's a bit of a mystery unless you really, really dig into the nitty gritty. And that's the beauty of it. And then in 2012, they started distilling themselves, and Drew Colesveen is a master at work, and they have a bunch of different mash bills, and it's all under the same label. And so it's this whole world of Kentucky bourbon under one label, and that's why I love it.
I posted on Twitter recently a photo I took last time I was at the bar at Willet, and someone responded, and they're like, not much variety in that bar, because they saw these bottles that all kind of look the same, they're the same shape, and I was like, well, I don't want to, I think I need more than 140 characters to explain this one.
Right.
So
I host a lot of poker games where my whiskey collection is, and I have a lot of Willets, and people that come in that love whiskey, but they like their, what they like, and they don't know anything outside of that, and so they see all the same looking bottle, and they're always like, oh, I see like a lot of the same one. Why is that? Why do you have a lot of the same bottle?
Right.
And I'm just like, oh, honey, you have no idea.
Oh, honey. Oh, you sweet summer child.
You sweet soul. Yeah. So,
well, let's open this. Would you mind doing the honors?
I would love to. Thank you.
Drum roll.
For you first, of course, David.
Oh boy, thanks.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
All right.
Thank you very much. my friend.
Thank you, brother.
Yes. I'm excited.
It's actually been a little bit. I poured this for some people, but I haven't tried it myself for probably a couple months. So actually, so it'll be fun to get back in.
115.8 proof, which for this, this early, not too crazy. If you were to ask a casual drinker that, they'd be like, holy cow, 115.8. But for the bourbon drinker, it's not too bad.
What is your for sourced Willets?
Yeah.
What do you have a proof sweet spot? I'm curious.
I'm not a proof hound.
Okay.
I love whiskey at all proofs. I'm all about flavor. Some of my favorite whiskeys of all time are like in the 90 proofs.
Yeah, I know you like the 25-year 100 proof rise.
Yes.
I know that's one of your favorites.
Yes. That's kind of been a theme of this trip. We've been talking
we just talked about this morning. We were just talking about this more yesterday.
Clay was at a liquor wine store, and he actually buzzed me because they have a 25-100 like behind the counter. And we're like, we might work a deal to try to get this bottle later. 25-100 is like my all-time favorite whiskey. That was one of my biggest aha moments. Was in 2020 at the bar at Willet, trying that with Jeff Knott, who's the former head bartender there, and he poured me like a half ounce just for me to try, and it was like the choir sang, and it was an aha moment.
Game over.
Have you been to Jeff's new Tartan House?
I haven't been to Tartan House. No.
Love Tartan House.
I need to go.
Love Tartan House in Louisville.
I love Jeff. He's amazing. He's a brother to me.
Shout out to Jeff. Tartan House in Louisville. Absolutely fantastic spot.
Yes, I cannot wait to go.
We need to.
Yeah, and we're gonna get Mason to drink some scotch there.
Well, let's not get crazy here.
Whoa,
that could be sacrilege here. So let's do a toast.
Let's do a toast. Yeah.
David, congratulations for everything you've been bringing to the American whiskey community. We're huge fans, and you're an incredible individual, and we're blessed to have you in our lives, man. So
I feel like I heard the name David Thomas Tao, and then I couldn't stop hearing the name.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
He was popping up everywhere.
And then it's just like, oh, you don't know him? What? Like, you guys got me. Finally, the time is here, man. In your house. Cheers, brother.
Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah. Oh, baby.
I'm going to be honest. This bottle,
you gotta get some of this.
This bottle was just a tiny bit tannic when we opened it up.
Sure.
Just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
And it settled in very nicely. And I am someone who believes in the power of oxidation for good and for bad.
It softens, the rough edges on whiskey.
Yeah. This bottle's really hitting its stride right about now. So I'm really enjoying it.
It is definitely oaky on finish, but it is rich and sweet and chocolate and berries, and it's delicious.
It actually reminds me. So I have one open somewhere. It reminds me kind of the profile of some of those old age-dated Noah's Mill.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that when you say maybe you predispose me with like some of those chocolatey notes. Yeah. And I mean the proof is right around there. Those are 114.3, I think. So this wouldn't be too far off on that proof.
Wow, some of those old wax top Noah's Mills are just
fantastic.
They're so good.
They're so
good. That pre-fire Heaven Hill funkiness, like it's just that early 90s distillate, like the same distillate that's in a lot of Willet barrels. Supposedly, it's in a lot of like the Parker's Heritage 24 year, which is one of my all-time favorite releases. That's 1990 distillate.
Yeah,
phenomenal, funky, rich, oaky, but just perfect.
We opened a 2006 Noah's Mill 15-year age date. I think when did they stop the age date? It was 2007, 2008.
Right on there, yeah.
Stephen Gray, who does a lot of the photography for Willet, was up in New York. I know
Stephen.
Yeah,
actually, I met him at the bar at Willet.
Same.
And we talked about you.
Oh my God.
Speaking of the
oh my God.
One of the guys was like, you don't know David Thomas Tao. I was like, we've had chats, but not in person. He's like, I meet this guy.
Steven's just built different because he had been to last time he was in town here in October, and we opened that Noah's Mill. It's in a cabinet over there somewhere. And
along with like 687 other bottles over here in a cabinet.
A little crowded. And Steven had just gone to a wedding and had a big night, and he was like, man, we were there till like 3-4 a.m. Steven, if you're hearing this, don't hate me for telling your secrets. And then he got up And I asked him, how he recovered the day after, because it sounded like he had a big night. He's like, yeah, I had like a bacon, egg, and cheese, and I went on a 7-mile run through Central Park. And I was like, man, you and I are very different people with the night you described.
He hit up the boathouse, rode a little bit, came back.
He had to sweat it all out.
I get it. I love fitness. I'm passionate about it. But after what he described he'd been through the night before, like I would have had like a cold compress,
Yeah.
So speaking of Pre-Fire Heaven Hill, you shared with us the other night that you picked up something super special.
Oh yeah, man, this is where
it's been on your bucket list here.
This is where I admit it. FOMO is a heck of a thing. It is the green-eyed monster, and I've been hearing a lot about you guys too in the fall, and my good buddy Frank Dobbins, I had asked him if he was around one weekend. He's like, no, I'll be in Arizona. I was like, Arizona? Where you going there?
What are you doing there?
Arizona? Frank, don't you know it's a desert out there, man? Why are you going out there? And Frank, Frank's extraordinarily well-traveled and one of the best people in American whiskey. I love Frank to death.
And an incredible human.
And so every time, Frank says he's going somewhere, I'm like, well, what should I know about it? And, he's like, oh, I'm going with the Bourbon Lore folks. I was like, oh, yeah, I've been, hearing about that. And then I logged on to, I was open Instagram kind of toward the end of that weekend, and I saw probably 4 posts in my feed in a row of, some really good old Heaven Hill, some good old 24-year Heaven Hill, and I was like, well, okay. And then before I knew it, I'm like buying a 24-year Martin's Mill. I was going to be done with buying for the year, and I was like, no, I'm not done buying for the year.
It's like those guys drinking that in Arizona. I'm going to get my own.
Yeah,
we can drink that in New York City too. It's all coming from Japan. It's fine. It's all getting re-imported.
I'm glad we inspired you right before the holidays. That was an amazing night. We had had the opportunity to be at the Grand Canyon the day before and open that 16-year Hirsch, and what an incredible opportunity to be able to celebrate such an iconic bottle on the rim of the Grand Canyon. And it was a surprise because nobody really necessarily knew what we were going to be bringing out the next night. And I'm a big fan of the very, very old Fitz line, and so we have a few goodies of the VBOFs in the Bourbon Lore family. So we had to bring out the 12-year and make some magic happen, but we've never done a lineup. I've never seen a lineup between basically the Bourbon Valley 24-year with the Martin Mills 24-year side by side. Let's go, and it was extraordinary.
Yeah,
all right,
with those bottles, good luck ever finding those on a bar anywhere.
Yeah.
You could probably count on one hand, how many bottles those are in America.
Yeah.
You find them more in Japan. But even then, find one that's freshly cracked is even more rare. Because most of the time you see one, it's just too expensive and it's just been sitting there for 7 8 years. And whiskey does change. At fresh crack, it was like a spiritual experience trying Bourbon Valley 24. Freshly opened, right next to the Martin Mills 24. Freshly opened. Unbelievable.
Well, you really get to compare the tall versus a squat bottle. What's the better aging environment for that old? I'm kidding. I'm totally
stop.
Totally.
There's a lot of people think it's the exact same whiskey in 2 different bottles, and they are definitely similar.
Just about a year apart, really. If you look at the actual dates, I think Ryan was saying they're just under 12 months apart with the actual bottling.
Yeah,
it's Heaven Hill distillate, especially from that era. I know when I've talked to folks, it is divisive as far as when it gets up over 20 years. I think one of the more divisive releases that I've heard debated, not that I would ever get in a debate, not that I would ever get in an argument about whiskey, is their 27-year release. So it was kind of kicked off the heritage line. And a lot of folks, thought it was a little too oaky, right? Pushing kind of the limits of what that distillate can do.
They did 2 dumps, right? I think that year, 2 different proofs, but in the 120s.
I don't actually know I couldn't tell you those two proofs, but that's just a bottle that I've heard a lot of people really debate. And I think that you do occasionally get these beautiful whiskeys that are so intensely oaky but still so intensely balanced. And a lot of the sourced Willets, that are up over some of those year ages, I think back to like Justified, right? And you're just like wow, that made it. You know what I mean? That made it through.
Absolutely.
You just never know. Like, I mean, Zev was there, who's head of American whiskey for Sotheby's, and we opened up something from Mammoth Cave from 1905 that we're all a little bit kind of like, you just never know. All right, let's open this up and find out. Unfreaking believable. Like, it was, by far a rock star of the weekend of an expression that surprised us all. And still to this day, I feel like I got a little piece of it that I keep chewing on, that I'm just like, goodness. I couldn't believe that it not only had an amazing palate, but the nose was there, the finish was there. And to think that you're experiencing something from an era that, was pre-prohibition, after the turn of the century, like, wow, like, what a special moment for that bottle, what a special moment for all of us. And it was an incredible surprise that it just rocked. It was stunning, absolutely delicious.
Complete time capsule.
Yeah.
Like, you can buy, artifacts or antiques from that era, and they're amazing, they're works of art, but where else can you actually taste and experience something that was made then, that still tastes, in theory, just as it did when it was bottled in 1905, is incredible. Phenomenal.
I feel like, I'm curious, I do want to ask before I make a very uneducated observation, I do want to ask, so far on the Bourbon Lore journey, if you guys wouldn't mind sharing, what are some of the things that have surprised you about the response to what you're doing, and about the passion that you all are bringing to not only the whiskey, but the history behind the whiskey?
Sure. I'll start. One of the biggest things that surprised me, when we were planning this VIP launch party in Scottsdale, we had all these just absolute badass experiences. Boom, 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 boom. Right? Everyone's gonna have the time of their lives. What I feel like, what I noticed a lot of people experiencing during these moments was actually emotion. Where when we opened that Hirsch at the Grand Canyon and gave thanks to America's spirit. People were emotional. I felt chills. It was an experience. And in that moment, money can't buy that. You know what I mean? It's where else can you go with enthusiasts like that and enjoy something of that caliber in that moment, in a wonder of the world?
Right.
People were emotional. We had a dinner booked. And we brought out some native dancers. And pay tribute
to corn and do a blessing.
Pay tribute to corn, which was absolutely amazing. And I found myself getting emotional from it. I was, you have this badass trip, lined up, and you think it's gonna be awesome. It absolutely was. But there was some spirituality to it that I feel really resonated, and that's what makes lifelong memories, because people remember how they felt.
Very well said. Yeah, no, I think to compliment Emerson in that, this has not necessarily been a collection in the way of I set out and thought I want to have the best bottles or certain bottles, or it was none of that, right? It was me growing up in the American West, me having this opportunity to be on these cattle ranches and in these mining towns, and these ghost towns, and obviously having the family antique shop, and spirit was just a part of community. It was a part of conversation. And, when we were either breaking bread to get to know a family and some, unique things that they wanted to potentially share with us, they would pour a little something, and I'd watch my pops, have a little Jack Daniels, or, he was a Jack Daniels guy. My grandpa, Stark was a Jim Beam guy, and my Uncle Terry was a Wild Turkey guy. So we all kind of picked our lanes, but we had it well covered back then. And so, for myself, it was being able to have those, to me, it was always in my life, and I wanted to be able to find these, these bottles and learn about them, and potentially start to tell the story of American whiskey, but also start to create a variation of those moments, and to be able to share it with, with friends, right? I think a lot of people throw out this term, whiskey enthusiast or bourbon enthusiast. For me, I feel like I want to live my life as an enthusiast. And what that means is there's certain things that I'm deeply passionate about. I want to be able to invest in that passion, both personally, professionally, financially, whether that's, working out. Some of us are a little more fit here than others. Or whether it's
run right for this, right?
Or whether it's I share with you, I love the outdoors, and I love the national parks. And so we took our family and lived, in 23 national parks for 15 months, right? Some people would be like, why would you do that? That doesn't make sense. I want to live my life as an enthusiast. So if I truly do want to live this beautiful life, then I need to be invested and committed to the things that, I really enjoy. So So collecting for me was not about collecting. It was about being able to tell the story, being able to share it with others. And so to be able to have this journey that I've been on now for many years, and been blessed to meet some incredible people that have shared these, these unique expressions from different eras and generations and distillers, to now be able to open them and share them. And maybe not necessarily everybody's like, wow, I really want to open up a $10,000 bottle. It's not necessarily for me about opening up a $10,000 bottle. It's what this bottle represented to American whiskey, what it represented to a certain distiller, what it represented now, and being able to elevate, the awareness, the interest, as well as the incredible profile of what American whiskey has the opportunity to taste like, to where that emotion, I was like, I can't believe we're finally we're sharing these bottles with people, and not everybody necessarily thought, wow, someday I want to have a 1957 very, very old Fitz 12-year bottled in bond, but to be able to learn about it in that moment, share it in this incredible environment with some amazing people, like that weekend will forever stay with me. So yeah, I agree. Like it was a surprise from the emotion for me too. So. Good question, David.
Was a good question.
Sorry to turn the tables a little bit.
How are we doing? All right, David, the executive producer of some incredible things, continuing to shape the theater world. Let's share that question back on your end of the spectrum here. What have you been surprised about? You've obviously been active. I mean, you're born and raised in the homeland of Bardstown, and you've seen obviously American whiskey and a lot of different kind of iterations, both as somebody who's lived there and now somebody who's obviously sharing the love through social. What's been, when you look at Bourbon Lore, any surprises on your side? Or
I think that the different groups of people who you all have been able to connect with. For me, one thing I love about whiskey is that it brings together, it's really just a vector for human connection. Don't get me wrong. I love the juice.
Oh, I preach into the choir. That's what I always say.
I want to be very clear that I love drinking whiskey, 100%. Right? Just to have it on record. This is not just a means to an end, but it kind of is. Mm-hmm. Because I love the fact that, well, you don't have to have grown up in a particular place. You don't have to have a particular background. You don't have to have a particular belief system. But this brings people together, and I get to connect with people who are different than me. I get to learn about them, and I get to learn about the world through them.
It's such a bonding agent.
And I have been very impressed with how you all have been bringing people together. And it's not just, I think I'll be perfectly candid, and I'll probably get in trouble for that's okay. But when I first heard of Bourbon Lore, I was a little confused. Right. And I was and I know it was in semi-stealth mode, right? I know part of that was like, you wanted people to be like, what is this? Right?
Yeah. A lot of people still are. Yeah, for sure.
And,
we're in our infancy. Yeah.
And I was like, part of me goes, I went, I hope this isn't just a thing for influencers, right? I hope this isn't just a FOMO machine.
Interesting, yeah.
I hope this is something that has some meat on the bone, right? Because I started hearing more about the folks who were involved. I started hearing about some of the resources who were involved. I remember when I heard Clay was involved. Clay's someone who I have a ton of respect for as an author, as a journalist, as a member of the New York whiskey community. And then I started seeing the events and seeing what y'all were doing, and I saw you were bringing together. Yes, they're influencers, but then there are journalists, and there are enthusiasts and distillers, right, and historians, and artisans, and musicians, and people who come from who are really multifaceted individuals who come from all different parts of the bourbon community, right? And if you took a screenshot or a screenshot, you were gathering content, right? But you look at the folks who you all are putting in rooms. You look at the folks who you all are talking to here on the New York tour. We'll call it the New York tour. The Bourbon Lore tour.
Welcome to the Bourbon Lore tour in New York.
Welcome to the Bourbon Lore tour. Yeah. Here's Wonderwall. But you see it, and you see all these different types of folks, and what I absolutely have been floored by, and getting to know you guys a little better, I don't want to say surprised by, it's moved from surprise to just being very impressed, is how you are constantly working to connect with different types of folks from the community and to learn about them. I mean, we were at a local bar, shout out to Travel Bar
Travel
recently.
Bar, Mike.
My local, which just happens to be a world-class whiskey bar, not too shabby. And the questions the interaction and I was trying not to eavesdrop too much, when you and Mike were talking, you were talking about everything from the 3-tier system of distribution to running a bar to the whiskey community your respective backgrounds, in tech, hospitality, family life, and I just noticed sadly you were stuck on the tarmac somewhere, a little bit delayed, but there in spirit, and I saw that the interest, right, in getting to know Mike's experience, as a proprietor, as a bar owner, as someone who's passionate about this and whose literal job is to create a space where people can feel welcome and explore the world of whiskey and meet other people through that vector. And so I've been very, very impressed with the emphasis and boundless energy that you all bring to connecting these different groups.
Wow, I don't think I could have asked for a better, thought or compliment when it comes to who we are and what we've been working on. I think, just like anything else, we don't necessarily have a definitive roadmap that says this is exactly what we are going to create, but we know we have a true north. And if we stay focused on that true north with, community and being able to tell the story, and keep that center focus around how all of us can continue to come together and grow and, be able to learn more, but also establish new friendships. It's a beautiful thing, right? And if Bourbon Lore can help do that in some, just some piece of the puzzle of American whiskey, then, we're honored to be able to contribute that. And it's even like, when we were thinking about Bourbon Lore for Scottsdale, and we're thinking about who would we, ultimately desire to be there. We wanted that diversification. We wanted a variety of individuals from all sorts of different kind of sections of, the United States. And we even had some guests from Canada, that wanted to come down. We reached out to like Cody Sanderson, who's one of the top Native American silversmiths in the world out of Santa Fe, and shared with Cody what we wanted to be able to do and surprise our guests with a special custom, Sterling Navajo piece that he would create. And he was like, "Yeah, like that sounds awesome. I will be there." Right? We're joking around like, Trey Wade from Blue Run, who's amazing. Love Trey. He was there, and like, every now and then I see Trey wearing, his Cody Sanderson, native silver piece there. And, I think that's kind of the magic of being able to have something that's a commonality, like you said, that brings us all together. And, David, our compliments to you, and thank you for having us over here. We didn't get into to some of your incredible projects that you're working on, but we'll have to save that for the next Bourbon Lore New York tour. But on behalf of Emerson, Clay, myself, and the rest of the Bourbon Lore team, thank you for doing what you're doing for the American whiskey community, and thank you for hosting us here today at your beautiful place here in Brooklyn. So it's been a real pleasure, and if you don't mind, we're going to get a couple of these to go.
Yeah. Well, I have some sample bottles ready. We'll make sure we'll bring these fired up.
We'll head over to see Joe over at Michter's. We'll bring a couple and say these are compliments of David.
All my love to Joe. He's a man who probably has plenty of whiskey on hand. I will say that much. So,
well, you got an empty 25 year over here, so maybe we can help you refill that.
Don't tell Joe about that. Tell him I need to restock.
Well, thanks, brother. Much love. Seriously, keep doing what you're doing. And thank you for inviting us to your home. It's been a lovely time.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Closing words to the camera, David.
We said it earlier. The best part of whiskey is the people behind it. So if you're not drinking with good friends, that's an excuse to go out and make something.
Amen.
Well said. Salute.
Cheers.
That's a wrap.